Hi, I'm Vorric Tenvale. My father-in-law looked me dead in the eyes at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "You're cheap trash who married up. You'll never be family." Then he announced my brother-in-law was getting the executive position at their company, the one I'd been promised for 3 years. I sat there silent, humiliated, while my wife Orlisse said nothing. The entire table laughed at the charity case who thought he belonged. I was about to walk out and never look back, until the doorbell rang. The man standing there in a $1,000 suit was someone I'd helped 5 years ago when he had nothing. Now he's worth billions. And he'd come looking for me. So tell me, when your own family treats you like garbage, what do? Stay quiet or let the truth rewrite everything? Before we dive in, what time is it where you are and where are you listening from? Drop a comment below. Because this story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's ever been underestimated. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was the kind of November afternoon that made Ashmont look like it belonged on a postcard. Golden light filtered through bare branches, lawns were perfectly manicured, and the smell of roasted turkey drifted from kitchen windows across Brookhaven Heights. The kind of neighborhood where every house had a 2-car garage and everyone knew exactly what everyone else was worth. I pulled up to the Castro estate just before 4. The driveway was already crowded with luxury sedans, each one probably worth more than I'd made in the past 2 years combined. A familiar knot formed in my chest, the same one that appeared every time I crossed into their world. Orlisse's family had a way of making you feel like an intruder even when you were invited. Inside, the grand foyer gleamed with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that caught the afternoon sun. Voices echoed from the dining room, laughter that seemed choreographed, performed for an audience that wasn't there yet. I could already hear Arundel holding court, his voice booming with that particular tone he reserved for people he wanted to impress. Vorric actually decided to show up. Sylvan announced the moment I stepped into the dining room. He stood near the bar cart, scotch in hand, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. We were placing bets on whether you'd make it. The long mahogany table was set for 16. Fine china, crystal glasses. Silver so polished you could see your reflection. I took the open seat at the far end, wedged between Orlisse's Aunt Nadira, who'd forgotten my name 3 Thanksgivings in a row, and a cousin who spent the entire time scrolling through his phone. Orlisse sat closer to the center, near her father. She'd chosen the emerald dress I'd never seen before, probably bought for this occasion. When I caught her eye, she offered a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes, then turned back to her wine glass like it held all the answers she needed. Arundel Castro sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his kingdom. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit jacket that fit like it was born on him, and that look in his eyes that said he'd already calculated your worth and found it wanting. He raised his glass, and the room fell silent with practiced ease. "Before we begin," he started, his voice filling every corner of the room, "I want to talk about what it means to be family, to be a Castro." His eyes swept the table, landing on Sylvan with unmistakable pride. "It means excellence. It means understanding that success isn't given, it's earned through vision, through connections, through knowing your worth." A few heads nodded. I kept my focus on the empty plate in front of me. "Sylvan here," Arundel continued, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "He understands that. He's brought 3 major clients to Castro Industries this quarter alone. He knows how to move in the right circles, how to speak the language of success." Applause rippled around the table. Orlisse clapped softly, her eyes still fixed somewhere past my shoulder. I'd been working at Castro Industries for 3 years. Started in logistics, worked my way up to operations management. I'd streamlined their supply chain, cut costs by 18%, and personally saved a shipment deal that would have cost them $500,000. But none of that seemed to register in this room. Arundel cleared his throat. "Which is why I'm pleased to announce that Sylvan will be taking over as Executive Vice President of Strategic Development." He pulled out a leather folder, the kind they use for important contracts. "Effective January 1st. The room erupted. Champagne corks popped. Sylvan stood, accepting handshakes and congratulations like he'd just won an election. That position had been dangled in front of me for 3 years. Every performance review, every late night I'd stayed to fix someone else's mistakes, Every time I'd gone above and beyond, Arundel had hinted it was coming. "Just prove yourself a little more," he'd say. "Show me you can think like a Castro." I'd proven myself, over and over, and here it was, gift wrapped for someone else. Thesia, Orlisse's mother, leaned across the table. Her smile was practiced, almost sympathetic. "Don't look so disappointed, Vorric. You do good work, important work. Someone has to handle the background operations." "Background," I repeated, my voice flat. "Well, yes," she said, touching her pearl necklace. "Not everyone is suited for leadership. There's no shame in knowing your place." Sylvan raised his glass toward me. "No hard feelings, right? Someone's got to keep the gears turning while the rest of us drive the vision forward." I didn't raise my glass. I didn't move. I just sat there, feeling the weight of every eye in the room measuring me, finding me lacking, confirming what they'd always believed. Orlisse's sister Kalis chimed in from across the table. "Honestly, Vorric, you should be grateful. Not everyone gets to work at Castro Industries. Most people with your background would never even get through the door." "My background?" I said quietly. "You know what I mean," Kalis said, waving her hand dismissively. "You came from nothing, no connections, no family legacy, no real education from anywhere that matters. Orlisse gave you an opportunity when she married you." The room had gone quiet again, but this time it was different. This time they were waiting, watching to see how I'd react, whether I'd finally break. Arundel set down his glass. "Let's not dance around it," he said, his voice cold and clinical. "You're cheap trash, Vorric. You married up, way up. And we've tolerated it, because Orlisse wanted to play savior. But don't ever think that makes you family. Don't think that 3 years of showing up and doing grunt work earns you a seat at this table." The words hit like a physical blow. Not because they were surprising, but because he'd finally said out loud what I'd felt in every interaction, every dismissive comment, every time they'd looked through me instead of at me. I turned to Orlisse. Her face had gone pale, but she said nothing. Her fingers gripped the stem of her wine glass, knuckles white, but her lips stayed pressed together. "Orlisse," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was worse than anger or disgust. It was resignation. Like she'd known this moment was coming and had simply chosen not to stop it. "I think," I said, pushing back from the table slowly, "I'm going to step outside for some air." No one objected. No one followed. As I walked toward the foyer, I could already hear the conversation resuming behind me, laughter returning like I'd never been there at all. I stood in front of the massive mirror in the hallway, staring at my reflection. Same face, same person I'd been when I walked in, but somehow smaller, like the room had compressed me into exactly what they'd always seen. That's when the doorbell rang. 5 years earlier, I'd been someone different, not better or worse, just different. I was working 3 jobs trying to keep my head above water, living in a studio apartment in the Harlow district, where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought loud enough to rattle the walls. One of those jobs was night security at a warehouse complex near the industrial sector. 12-hour shifts, minimum wage, but it was quiet and gave me time to take online courses in supply chain management. I had plans. Not grand ones, but mine. It was a Tuesday night in February when everything changed. Around 2 in the morning I was doing my rounds when I heard voices near the loading dock. 3 of them, trying to jimmy open one of the container units. I should have called the police, that was protocol. But I was young and stupid and thought I could handle it. "Hey," I shouted, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "You need to leave, now." 2 of them ran, the 3rd one didn't. He was older, maybe mid-40s, wearing clothes that had seen better days and carrying a crowbar like he knew how to use it. But what stopped me wasn't the weapon. It was his face, exhausted, desperate, scared. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said, hands shaking. "I just need something to sell, anything. They're going to take my business. Everything I built, I'm out of options." I should have called it in, should have followed protocol. Instead, I lowered the flashlight. "What kind of business?" I asked. "Import distribution," he said, voice cracking. "Small operation. I made some bad deals, trusted the wrong partners. Now I'm $60,000 in debt, and I've got 48 hours before they liquidate everything." I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe because I recognized that, look, I'd seen it in my own mirror often enough. Maybe because I understood what it felt like to watch everything you'd worked for slip through your fingers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Put down the crowbar," I said, "and tell me about your distribution routes." We sat on the loading dock until sunrise. Kaylor Vinrith, that was his name, laid out his entire operation, where he'd gone wrong, what deals had collapsed, how the debt had compounded. I listened, asked questions, and started seeing the patterns he'd missed. "You're shipping to the wrong markets," I told him as dawn broke. "Your overhead is triple what it should be, because you're trying to compete in sectors that are already oversaturated. But if you pivot here," I sketched it out on the back of my security log sheet. "Target these industrial clients instead of retail, you could cut costs by 40% and increase your margins." He stared at the paper like I'd just handed him a treasure map. "Who are you?" he asked. "Nobody," I said. "Just a guy who reads too much about logistics." But I didn't stop there. Over the next 3 days, I helped him restructure his entire approach, connected him with a few contacts I'd made through my courses, helped him draft a proposal to renegotiate his debt, showed him how to salvage the relationships that mattered, and cut loose the ones that didn't. 6 weeks later, his business was profitable again. 3 months after that, he'd paid off half his debt. A year later, he'd expanded into 3 new markets. I didn't hear from him for a while after that initial crisis, just a thank you note and a check for $5,000 that I tried to refuse, but he insisted. "Payment for consultation," he wrote, "from someone who knows what you're worth." Then he disappeared from my life as quickly as he'd entered it. I heard through the grapevine that his company had been acquired by a larger firm, that he'd made a fortune. But I never reached out, never thought to. That wasn't why I'd helped him. Meeting Orlisse happened 2 years after that, at a charity fundraiser I'd been dragged to by a colleague. She was beautiful, confident, and for some reason I still don't understand, interested in me. I was honest about where I came from, what I did. She said it didn't matter. "My family's going to hate you," she'd said with a laugh on our 3rd date. "They think anyone without a trust fund is beneath us. But I don't care what they think." I believed her. I actually believed her. The first time I met Arundel, he looked at me like I was something tracked in on someone's shoe. "So you're the security guard," he'd said, not even bothering with a handshake. "Operations analyst now," I'd corrected. "I'm working on supply chain optimization." "How nice," he'd replied, turning away before I'd finished the sentence. The wedding was small, despite Thessia's protests. Orlisse had wanted it that way, or so she said. Looking back, I wonder if she just didn't want the spectacle of me standing at the altar in a rented tux while her side of the church sparkled with old money and pedigree. The job at Castro Industries came 3 months after the wedding. "A favor," Arundel had called it. "Since you're family now, don't make me regret it." I didn't. I worked harder than anyone else in that building, came in early, stayed late, turned every project into a success. I thought if I proved myself enough, if I showed them I belonged, eventually they'd see me as something other than the mistake their daughter made. 3 years of that. 3 years of being talked over in meetings, having my ideas credited to others, watching Sylvan coast on his last name while I ground myself down trying to earn what should have been freely given. And Orlisse watched it happen. She'd come home from family dinners and tell me to ignore them, that they'd come around eventually, but she never defended me in the moment. Never stood up when her father dismissed me, or when Sylvan made his casual digs. She'd just sip her wine and look away, like if she didn't acknowledge it, it wasn't really happening. The Thanksgiving dinner wasn't an anomaly. It was just the first time they'd stopped pretending. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I was still standing in the hallway, staring at nothing, when I heard Arundel's irritated voice from the dining room. "Who shows up uninvited to Thanksgiving dinner?" he muttered. "Thessia, did you invite someone else?" "Of course not," she replied, offended at the suggestion. I moved toward the door, mostly because no one else seemed inclined to. Through the frosted glass panel, I could see a figure in what looked like an expensive coat. Probably someone selling something or lost looking for another address. I opened the door and froze. Kaylor Vinrith stood on the Castro doorstep wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. His hair was styled differently, gray at the temples now, And he carried himself with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've got nothing left to prove. But I recognized the eyes, same ones that had looked at me desperately across a loading dock 5 years ago. "Vorric?" he said and smiled. "I've been looking for you." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Behind me I heard footsteps. Arundel appeared in the hallway, his expression shifting from annoyed to confused to suddenly alert. "Can I help you?" Arundel said, moving past me like I wasn't there. "This is a private family gathering." Kalor's eyes flicked to Arundel, then back to me. "I'm not here for you," he said simply. "I'm here for Vorric Tenvale." The name hung in the air. Arundel's face tightened. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" Arundel asked, though his tone suggested he was already calculating, already trying to place this man who radiated wealth and authority. "Kaylor Vinrith," he said, extending his hand, "CEO of Vinrith Global Solutions." I watched Arundel's face change. Vinrith Global Solutions was one of the largest logistics and distribution companies in the country. I'd read about their expansion in business journals. Kaylor had built an empire from the ashes of that small distribution company he'd nearly lost. Arundel's handshake was suddenly eager. "Arundel Castro Industries. This is quite unexpected. If you're looking for Vorric, he's just my son-in-law. He works in our operations department. Basic logistics." Kaylor didn't let go of his hand. "I'm aware of where he works. I'm also aware that you just publicly humiliated him at your dinner table." The hallway went silent. Arundel's smile froze. "I'm sorry," Arundel said. By now, the entire dining room had emptied into the foyer. Sylvan stood near the back, glass still in hand. Orlisse had positioned herself near the stairs, face pale. Thessia gripped her pearls like they were a lifeline. Kaylor released Arundel's hand and turned fully toward the gathered crowd. "5 years ago, your son-in-law saved my entire company. I was 3 days away from bankruptcy, desperate enough to break into a warehouse for something to sell. Vorric found me. And instead of calling the police, instead of walking away, he spent 3 days helping me restructure my entire business model." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and held up the screen. It showed a digital document, some kind of official filing. "This is the consultation agreement he made me sign. Pro bono work. He refused payment beyond a token amount. Said he just wanted to help." Kaylor looked at me, and something in his expression made my throat tight. "You told me once that success isn't about what you take, it's about what you build. I built Vinrith Global on the foundation you helped me create. My company is now worth $3.2 billion. Gasps echoed through the foyer. Sylvan's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. "And I'm here," Kaylor continued, turning back to Arundel, "because I've been trying to find Vorric for 2 years. I wanted to offer him a position. Chief Operations Officer of Vinrith Global. 7-figure salary, full equity package, complete autonomy to build the operations division however he sees fit." The silence was deafening. "But more than that," Kaylor said, his voice hardening. "I wanted to make sure he knew what he's worth, because clearly, the people who should value him the most have no idea." Arundel's face had gone from pale to red. "Now wait just a moment. There's clearly been some misunderstanding. Vorric is a valued member of our organization. I was just announcing that he'd be taking on additional responsibilities." "You called him cheap trash," Kaylor said flatly. "I was standing outside the window. I heard every word." Thessia made a small sound. Kalis had backed up until she hit the wall. Sylvan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "That was taken out of context," Arundel stammered. "Family banter. You don't understand our dynamic." "I understand perfectly," Kaylor said. "You've spent 3 years exploiting his talent while treating him like he's beneath you. You've taken credit for his ideas, blocked his advancement, and made sure he never received recognition for the innovations that saved your company millions." He pulled out another document from his coat pocket. "I did some research before coming here. Operation streamlining that cut your supply costs by 18% last year? That was Vorric's design. The vendor negotiation strategy that secured your 3 biggest contracts? Vorric's approach. The logistics software integration that your company now relies on? Vorric built the entire framework." Arundel opened his mouth, then closed it. Kaylor turned to me. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm offering you the COO position. Starting salary of $1.2 million annually, plus equity that will vest over 4 years. Company car, full benefits, and a signing bonus of $250,000. My head was spinning. The numbers didn't seem real. "But I want you to know," Kaylor said, his voice softening. "You don't owe me anything. You helped me when I had nothing to offer in return. This isn't repayment. This is recognition. You deserve this position because you're brilliant, not because you once helped me." I looked at Orlisse. She was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Vorric," Arundel said, recovering slightly, "let's not be hasty. We can discuss your position at Castro Industries. Perhaps I was premature about the executive VP role. We can revisit that." Kaylor laughed, short and sharp. "You're going to revisit it now? After you publicly humiliated him? After you announced his position was going to someone else?" "Family matters are complicated," Arundel said weakly. "This isn't complicated," Kaylor replied. He looked at me again. "Vorric, the offer stands. But I want you to take time to think about it. This is your decision, no pressure." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Heavy stock, embossed lettering, my personal number, call me when you're ready." I took the card with shaking hands. Kaylor looked at the assembled crowd one more time. "One more thing," he said. "Vorric is worth more than all of you combined, not because of his bank account or his connections, but because when he saw someone in trouble, his first instinct was to help. You should all be ashamed of yourselves." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Castro Industries? I'll be terminating our vendor contract. I don't do business with companies that don't value their people." The door closed behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sylvan finally said, "Did that just happen?" Arendel's face had gone purple. "Get out," he said, voice shaking. But he wasn't looking at Kaylor's retreating figure. He was looking at me. "What?" I said. "Get out of my house," Arundel repeated. "You brought that man here. You humiliated us in our own home." "I didn't bring him here," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I had no idea he was coming." "Liar," Thessia hissed. "You planned this. Some sort of revenge." I looked at them all, these people who'd spent 3 years making me feel worthless, and something inside me snapped, not into anger, but into clarity. "You know what?" I said. "I'm done. I'm done pretending this is a family. I'm done trying to earn something you were never going to give me, and I'm done letting you make me feel like I'm not enough." I turned to Orlisse. You knew how they treated me, and you never once stood up for me, not once." Her eyes filled with tears. "Vorric, please." "No," I said, "I'm leaving. And I'm taking the job." I walked to the door, pulled it open, and stepped into the cold November air. Behind me I could hear shouting, Arundel's voice demanding I come back, Orlisse crying, but I didn't turn around. Kaylor was standing beside a black sedan, waiting. When he saw me, he smiled. "That took courage," he said. "That took stupidity," I replied. "I just blew up my entire life." "No," Kaylor said. "You just started living it." I spent that night in a hotel. Nothing fancy, just a room with clean sheets and silence that felt heavier than any sound. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Orlisse called 17 times. Arundel left 3 voicemails that ranged from threatening legal action to offering awkward apologies that didn't sound apologetic at all. Sylvan sent a text that just said, "We need to talk." I turned off my phone at midnight and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The way Kaylor had stood in that doorway like some kind of ghost from my past. The expression on Arendel's face when he realized I wasn't nothing. The silence from Orlisse when I needed her most. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called Kaylor. "I'll take the position," I said when he answered. "When do I start?" "Monday," he said without hesitation. "But first, I need you to come to the office. There's something you should see." Vinrith Global Solutions occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. The lobby alone was more impressive than the entire Castro Industries building. When I gave my name at the front desk, the receptionist smiled like she'd been expecting me. "Mr. Vinrith is waiting for you in his office," she said. "Top floor." The elevator ride felt surreal. Just 48 hours ago, I'd been the family embarrassment. Now I was walking into a corner office that overlooked the entire city. Kaylor stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. He turned when I entered. "Vorric," he said, gesturing to a chair, "Sit, we need to talk before you officially accept this position." Something in his tone made me hesitate. "Is there a problem?" "Not a problem," he said carefully. "But there's something you need to know about Castro Industries." He pulled out a thick folder and set it on the desk between us. "When I started looking for you 2 years ago, I had to trace back through your employment history. That led me to Castro Industries, so I started doing research on the company." He opened the folder. Inside were financial reports, contract documents, internal memos. "Your father-in-law has been systematically taking credit for your work for 3 years. But it's more than that. He's been actively suppressing your advancement because he knew if you moved up, people would realize you were the real architect behind their recent success." I stared at the documents. There were emails from Arundel to other executives, explicitly instructing them to attribute my projects to other team members. Performance reviews where he'd downgraded my contributions. Even a memo suggesting I be kept in operations to maintain stability, while never explaining that stability meant keeping me from advancing. "He was afraid of you," Kaylor said quietly. "He knew that if you got any real visibility, it would expose how much of their recent success was built on your work." My hands clenched. "Why?" "Because 3 years ago, Castro Industries was failing," Kaylor said. He pulled out another set of documents. They were 6 months from bankruptcy. Then suddenly, they weren't. Their efficiency doubled, their costs dropped, and they secured contracts they had no business winning. He looked at me meaningfully. "That all started the month you joined the company." I thought back to my first days at Castro Industries. The chaos, the inefficiency, the systems that made no sense. I'd spent my first 3 months just trying to understand how they'd survived this long. Then I'd started making suggestions. Small changes at first, then bigger ones as I gained confidence. "I saved them," I said slowly. "You rebuilt them," Kaylor corrected. "From the ground up, Arundel knew it. That's why he had to keep you down. If anyone realized you were the reason for their turnaround, his whole legacy would be exposed as a lie." I sat back, processing. "Orlisse knew." Kaylor nodded. "I found emails between her and her father. She tried to advocate for you a few times. But she always backed down when he pushed back." He slid one particular email across the desk. It was from Orlisse to Arundel, dated 6 months ago. "Dad, you need to give Vorric credit for the Henderson deal. Everyone knows it was his strategy. If you keep blocking him, he's going to leave." Arundel's response was short. "Let him leave. He signed a non-compete. He can't work in this industry for 3 years if he quits. And without a reference from me, no one will hire him anyway. He's trapped." The words blurred on the screen. I read it again, then a third time, making sure I understood. "He was holding me hostage," I whispered. "Yes," Kaylor said. "He knew you were too valuable to let go, but too dangerous to promote. So he created a cage and convinced you it was a career." I thought about all those late nights, all those times I'd stayed to fix problems that weren't mine. Every time Arundel had promised advancement was just around the corner if I proved myself a little more. It had all been a lie. A calculated strategy to extract everything I had while giving nothing back. "There's more," Kaylor said. He pulled out another document. "This is from 2 weeks ago. Arundel received a job inquiry about you from a competitor. Someone wanted to poach you. Arundel told them you were unreliable, that you had performance issues, and that hiring you would be a mistake." My jaw tightened. Who was the company? "Harrison Logistics," Kaylor said. "They were prepared to offer you a director position. Arundel killed it before you even knew about it." I stood up, walked to the window. The city stretched out below, full of people living their lives, chasing their dreams, and I'd spent 3 years in a cage I didn't even know existed. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because you need to know what you're walking away from," Kaylor said. "And because you need to understand that accepting my offer isn't just about moving forward. It's about making sure Arundel can't do this to anyone else." I turned to face him. "What do you mean?" Kaylor stood, straightened his tie. "I want to acquire Castro Industries." The statement hung in the air. "You what?" "Their vendor contracts are failing," Kaylor said. "Without our partnership, which I terminated, they're going to struggle. Other companies will follow suit once word gets out. Within 6 months, they'll be looking for a buyer." He met my eyes. "I want to buy them, restructure the entire operation, and I want you to lead it." My mind raced. "You want me to take over my father-in-law's company?" I want you to save it, Kaylor corrected. The company employs 300 people, good people who don't deserve to lose their jobs because Arundel is too proud and too petty to run it properly. You can save those jobs, you can build something better. He paused. But that's only if you want to. This offer stands regardless. You can be COO of Vinrith Global and never think about Castro Industries again. Or you can do something bigger. I looked back at the folder, at all the evidence of betrayal and manipulation. Then I thought about the 300 employees who had nothing to do with Arundel's games. People who treated me with respect, even when their leadership didn't. I need to think about it, I said. Take your time, Kaylor said. But Vorric, whatever you decide, make sure it's what you want. Not what you think you owe anyone, not revenge, just what you want. I left his office with the folder under my arm and my head spinning. In the elevator, I finally turned my phone back on. The notifications exploded. More calls from Orlisse, texts from her sister trying to smooth things over. Even one from Sylvan asking if the offer was real. But there was one message that stood out, from a number I didn't recognize. This is Thessia. We need to talk. About Orlisse. She's not doing well. Please call. I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. But another part, the part that had loved Orlisse despite everything, couldn't ignore it. I called the number. Thessia answered on the first ring. Vorric, she said, and her voice was different, smaller. Thank you for calling. What's wrong with Orlisse? I asked. A pause. She locked herself in her room after you left. She won't talk to anyone, won't eat, just keep saying she ruined everything. I closed my eyes. She made her choice, Thessia. I know, Thessia said quietly, and it was the wrong one. I know that now. We all do. A little late for that, I said. It is, she agreed. But I'm calling because you deserve to know the truth, about why Orlisse never stood up for you. I waited. Arundel threatened her, Thessia said. 3 years ago, when she first told us she was marrying you, he said if she went through with it, he'd cut her off completely. No inheritance, no family support, nothing. She'd be on her own. She married me anyway, I said. She did, Thessia said, but he added a condition. She could marry you, but if she ever publicly contradicted him, especially about business matters, the same punishment would apply. He wanted to make sure you stayed in your place, and he knew the best way to do that was to make sure Orlisse stayed silent. My grip tightened on the phone. She chose money over me. She chose security, Thessia said, or at least she thought she did, but watching you walk away, seeing what we did to you, I think she finally realized what she actually chose. I didn't know what to say. I'm not asking you to forgive her, Thessia continued. I'm not even asking you to come back. I just thought you deserved to know that her silence wasn't indifference. It was fear. And that doesn't excuse it, but maybe it explains it. Thanks for telling me, I said, and ended the call. I stood in the parking garage, surrounded by luxury cars and the hum of ventilation systems, and felt completely hollow. Kaylor had given me the truth about Arundel. Thessia had given me the truth about Orlisse. And now I had to figure out what to do with all of it. My phone rang again, this time a number I recognized. My old colleague from the warehouse, the one who'd invited me to that fundraiser where I'd met Orlisse. Marcus? I said, answering. It's been a while. Vorric, he said, excitement in his voice. I just heard the news. Is it true? Did Kaylor Vinrith really offer you COO? Word travels fast, I muttered. It's all over the industry, Marcus said. People are calling it the feel-good story of the year. Guy helps a stranger, stranger becomes a billionaire, comes back to save the guy. It's like something out of a movie. It doesn't feel like a movie, I said. Listen, Marcus said. I'm calling because you need to know something. Castro Industries is in trouble, real trouble. The Vinrith contract termination is already making waves. 2 other major clients just pulled out this morning. There's talk of layoffs by the end of the month. My stomach dropped. How many? At least 100 positions, Marcus said. Maybe more. Arundel's trying to keep it quiet, but it's going to come out soon. I thought about those 300 employees. People who'd done nothing wrong, who were about to lose their jobs because of Arundel's pride and my decision to walk away. Thanks for the heads up, I said. Vorric, Marcus said, whatever you're planning, do it fast. Those people don't have much time. I ended the call and looked down at the folder Kaylor had given me. Inside was evidence of everything Arundel had done. Proof that could destroy him, vindicate me, and maybe, just maybe, save those jobs. But using it would mean going to war. Not just with Arundel, but with everything that came with it. The media attention, the family drama, the ugly truths that would come out about everyone involved. I opened the folder and pulled out one specific document. A contract Arundel had signed 3 years ago, personally guaranteeing certain performance metrics for Castro Industries. Metrics that had only been met because of my work. If those metrics failed now, if the company collapsed, Arundel would be personally liable. His personal fortune, his reputation, everything would be on the line. I took a photo of the document and sent it to Kaylor with a single message. I know what I want to do, but I'm going to need your help. His response came immediately, name it. I called him back. When he answered, I said, I want to save Castro Industries. But I want to do it my way. Not as revenge, as redemption. Tell me what you need, Kaylor said. And for the first time in 3 years, I started to plan something that was truly mine. The next 72 hours moved like a chess game played at triple speed. Kaylor connected me with his corporate attorneys, his financial analysts, and his entire strategic planning team. We worked out of a secure conference room in the Vinreth building, documents spread across every surface, whiteboards filled with timelines and numbers. The key, I explained to the assembled team, is that we're not trying to destroy Castro Industries. We're trying to save it from Arundel. Kaylor's lead attorney, a sharp woman named Finel, leaned forward. Walk us through the leverage. I pulled up the contract on the main screen. 3 years ago, when Castro Industries was failing, Arundel took out a personal guarantee loan to keep the company afloat. The terms required the company to maintain specific performance metrics, or he'd be personally liable for $20 million. And they've been meeting those metrics, Finel said. Because of my systems, I said. But here's what he doesn't know. I built in dependencies. Nothing malicious. Nothing that would harm the company. But there are specific processes, specific relationships with vendors and clients that only work because of frameworks I established. I pulled up another document. When I left, I took nothing with me. But I know exactly where the weak points are. And right now, with the Vinreth contract gone and other clients following suit, those weak points are about to become cracks. One of the financial analysts spoke up. How long until the company fails to meet the guarantee terms? 6 weeks, I said. Maybe 8 if they scramble. But they won't scramble effectively because they don't actually understand how their own systems work. They just know that they've been working. Kaylor stood. So we wait for the collapse, then offer to buy? No, I said firmly. We don't wait for the collapse. We prevent it, but we do it on our terms. I turned to the whiteboard and started mapping it out. Here's what happens. First, we identify the 100 employees who are about to be laid off. We reach out quietly, offer them positions at Vinreth subsidiaries. Same pay, better benefits. We get them out before Arundel can hurt them. Finel nodded, taking notes. Second, I continued, we approach Castro's remaining major clients. Not to poach them, but to offer partnership deals through Vinreth that keep their contracts with Castro intact. We stabilize their revenue stream, but we do it in a way that makes it clear we're the ones holding the company together. And third? Kaylor asked. Third, we wait for Arundel to realize he's drowning. Then we make an offer, not for the whole company, for operational control. We offer to restructure, to bring in new management, to turn the company around, but it means Arundel steps down. The room was quiet. You want him to voluntarily give up control, Finel said. I want him to understand that his choice is simple, I said. Let us save the company and protect the employees, or watch it collapse and lose everything in the process, including his reputation, his fortune, and his family legacy. Kaylor smiled slowly. It's brilliant. We're not destroying him. We're giving him a way out. But there's one condition, I said. When we restructure, I want complete transparency. Every employee gets to see exactly what happened, how the company nearly failed, how it was turned around, and who was really responsible for what. No more lies. No more stolen credit. That's going to create media attention, Finel warned. Good, I said. Let it. The truth doesn't need to hide. Over the next 2 days, we executed the plan. Kaylor's HR team reached out to the employees on the layoff list. One by one, they accepted positions with Vinreth subsidiaries. By the end of day 2, We'd secured 97 of the 100 at-risk jobs. The client partnerships took longer, but by day 3, we had commitments from 4 of Castro's 5 major remaining clients. They'd stay with Castro, but only if Vinreth guaranteed operational oversight. On day 4, the news broke. Business journals reported that Castro Industries was in crisis, that major layoffs were imminent, and that the company's founder was facing personal financial liability. The stock price dropped 40% in one day. That evening, my phone rang. Arundel. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Vorric, his voice was strained. We need to talk. I'm listening, I said. This situation with the company, he started. It's being blown out of proportion, but I'm willing to discuss bringing you back. A proper position this time. VP level. We can negotiate terms. I'm not interested in coming back, I said. Silence. Then, what do you want? I want you to sell, I said simply. The company isn't for sale. It will be, I said. In about 2 weeks, when you fail to meet your guarantee terms, and the bank calls in your personal liability, or you can sell now, on terms that save your reputation and your fortune. You did this, he said, and his voice shook with rage. You sabotaged us. I didn't sabotage anything, I said calmly. I left, and your house of cards collapsed because it was never built on a real foundation. It was built on my work, and you never bothered to understand how any of it actually functioned. I won't sell to you, he spat. You're not selling to me, I said. You're selling operational control to Vinreth Global Solutions. Kailor will make a fair offer. You keep ownership, you keep your equity, but you step down from management. The company gets restructured by people who actually know what they're doing. And what do you get out of this? I get to save 300 jobs, I said, and I get to make sure you never do to anyone else what you did to me. He hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Orlisse, about the message from her mother. Part of me wanted to reach out, to check on her. But another part, the part that had been dismissed and diminished for 3 years, wasn't ready. Around 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text, from Orlisse. I know I don't deserve a response, but I need you to know I'm sorry. For everything, you were right about all of it. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't find the words. Another message came through. My father showed me the documents, everything you found. I didn't know how bad it was. I should have fought harder. I should have protected you. Then, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what he did, what I let him do, and I'm ashamed. I finally typed back, I'm glad you see it, but seeing it now doesn't change what happened. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I know I'm not trying to fix this. I just needed you to know the truth. What truth? That I loved you, I still do, but I was too weak to show it when it mattered, and I have to live with that. I set the phone down and walked to the window. The city lights blurred through sudden moisture in my eyes. Orlisse had made her choices. I'd made mine. And there was no going back to rewrite any of it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the goal wasn't to erase what happened, but to make sure it meant something going forward. The next morning, Kailor called me into his office. Arundel's attorney reached out. He said, he wants to negotiate. What are his terms? He'll accept operational restructuring if we agree to keep the Castro name on the company and if he maintains a seat on the board. I thought about it. Counteroffer. We keep the Castro name, but he gets no board seat. Instead, we create an advisory position. No voting power, no operational input. Just a title that lets him save face. Kailor nodded. And the employees? The transparency? Non-negotiable, I said. Everyone gets the full story. Press release, town hall, everything. He's not going to like that. I don't care what he likes, I said. This isn't about him anymore. Kailor smiled. I'll make the call. That afternoon, while Kailor negotiated with Arundel's attorneys, I drove to Castro Industries. I hadn't been back since Thanksgiving. The building looked the same, but walking through those doors felt completely different. I went straight to the operations floor. The team was there, working late as always. When they saw me, the room went quiet. Vorric, Marcus said, standing from his desk. What are you doing here? I came to tell you something, I said, addressing the whole room. You're not getting laid off. Confused looks passed between them. Vinreth Global Solutions is acquiring operational control of Castro Industries. There will be changes, but no layoffs. In fact, we're expanding. Anyone who wants to stay will have a position. Anyone who wants to move to other opportunities within Vinrith will make that happen too." A woman named Orlisse, who'd been with the company for 15 years, raised her hand. "What about Mr. Castro?" "He's stepping down from day-to-day operations," I said. "The company is being restructured under new management." "Who's going to run it?" someone else asked. I took a breath. "I am, if you'll have me." The room erupted, some in applause, some in shocked conversation, some in relief. Marcus pushed through the crowd and grabbed my hand. "You came back for us," he said. "I left for me," I replied. "I came back for you." That night, the deal was finalized. Arundel signed over operational control. The press release went out the next morning, and by noon, every major business outlet was covering the story. From security guard to CEO, the Vorric Tenvale story. How one man saved his former company after being called trash. Billionaire and protege team up for corporate redemption. The narrative was being written, and this time, it was the truth. The town hall meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Every Castro Industries employee had been invited, along with key stakeholders and members of the press. Kaylor had suggested we keep it small, but I insisted on full transparency. If we were going to rebuild this company, everyone needed to understand what it was being rebuilt from. The conference center we'd rented could hold 400 people. By 9:30, every seat was filled, and people were standing along the walls. I stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtain as the crowd settled in. My hands were steady, but my heart hammered against my ribs. Kaylor appeared beside me. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We could release a statement, handle it through official channels. You don't owe these people a public accounting." "Yes, I do," I said. "They deserve to know the truth, all of it." At exactly 10 o'clock, I walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. I could see faces I recognized from the operations floor, executives who'd ignored me in meetings, even a few board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. And in the back corner, partially hidden behind a pillar, I saw Orlisse. She wore sunglasses inside, her posture small and folded in on itself. Beside her sat Thessia, looking older than I remembered. I stepped up to the podium and adjusted the microphone. "My name is Vorric Tenvale," I began. 3 years ago, I started working at Castro Industries in the logistics department. Some of you know me, most of you don't. But my work has affected every person in this room. I pulled up the first slide on the screen behind me. It showed Castro Industries, performance metrics from 3 years ago, the red numbers screaming failure. This is what the company looked like when I arrived. 6 months from bankruptcy, hemorrhaging money, unable to fulfill basic contracts. The only thing keeping the doors open was a personal guarantee loan taken out by Arundel Castro. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. I was hired to work in operations, basic logistics, nothing glamorous, but I saw the problems immediately. Your supply chain was broken. Your vendor relationships were adversarial instead of collaborative. Your internal systems were decades out of date and actively working against efficiency. I clicked to the next slide, showing the changes I'd implemented month by month. So I fixed it. I redesigned your distribution network. I renegotiated vendor contracts. I built new software integrations that cut processing time by 60%. I personally managed the crisis when your largest client threatened to leave, and I structured the deal that kept them. The room was completely quiet now. Within 18 months, the company was profitable again. Within 2 years, you were exceeding industry standards. Your efficiency ratings went from bottom quartile to top 10% in your sector. I paused, let that sink in. But here's what you didn't know. Every one of those innovations, every successful project, every major contract win was attributed to someone else, specifically to Arundel Castro and his son Sylvan. The murmuring grew louder. I saw several employees exchange glances. "I have documentation," I continued, pulling up a new slide. It showed an internal memo from Arundel instructing department heads to credit my work to other team members. Emails. Performance reviews where my contributions were minimized or erased. Even recordings of meetings where my proposals were presented by others without attribution. A reporter in the third row was typing furiously. Others had their phones out, recording. But this isn't just about stolen credit, I said. This is about what happens when leadership prioritizes ego over excellence. When they're so threatened by talent that they'd rather suppress it than nurture it. I clicked again. The slide showed the employment numbers, specifically the 100 positions that had been slated for termination. 2 weeks ago, this company planned to lay off 100 employees. Not because the company was failing, but because leadership had lost key contracts through their own arrogance and incompetence. Those employees were going to pay the price for decisions they had no part in making. I could see anger building in the room now, people realizing how close they'd come to losing everything. Here's the full timeline, I said, and spent the next 10 minutes walking through everything. How Arundel had blocked my advancement. How he'd sabotaged job opportunities from other companies. How he'd used his daughter, my wife, as leverage to keep me compliant. How he'd built his reputation on work that wasn't his. When I finished, the room exploded. Questions shouted from every direction, reporters surging forward, employees demanding answers. I raised my hand for quiet. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," I said once the noise died down. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know who was really running this company. And you deserve to know that moving forward, that's going to change." I gestured to Kalor, who stepped onto the stage. Vorric Global Solutions has acquired operational control of Castro Industries. Arundel Castro has stepped down from all management duties. The company will be restructured with complete transparency. Every employee will have access to accurate information about performance, attribution, and advancement opportunities. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Who's going to run it?" Kalor smiled. "Vorric Tenvale will serve as Chief Operating Officer, reporting directly to me. He'll have full authority to rebuild this company the right way." The room erupted again, but this time it was different. There was applause mixed with the chaos, people standing, some wiping their eyes. Marcus pushed his way to the front and started clapping, and others joined in until the entire room was on its feet. But I wasn't watching them. I was watching the back corner, where Orlisse had removed her sunglasses. Tears streamed down her face. Thessia had an arm around her shoulders. And for the first time since I'd known that family, I saw something that looked like shame. The press conference that followed was intense. Reporters wanted every detail, every piece of evidence. I provided it all, holding nothing back. By noon, the story was everywhere. Business networks, social media, even mainstream news outlets picked it up. Corporate theft exposed, how one executive stole his employees' success. The man who saved his company twice. Vorric Tenvale, from invisible to undeniable. By mid-afternoon, Arundel's attorney released a statement. It was carefully worded, full of phrases like misunderstandings and different perspectives on collaborative work. It blamed the situation on poor communication and suggested that Arundel had always intended to properly credit all contributors. No one believed it. The real blow came when 3 former Castro Industries employees went public with their own stories. A woman who'd had her research stolen and presented by Sylvan. A man who'd been fired after questioning why his project proposal appeared under someone else's name. A junior analyst who'd been told that taking credit for her work was just how things work at this level. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic. By evening, Castro Industries' social media pages were flooded with comments. Some supportive of the changes, others angry about what had been hidden for so long. The company's review ratings plummeted as former employees added their experiences. One post went viral, a simple statement from someone who'd worked there a decade ago. "I always wondered why I never advanced despite my results. Now I know, they were too busy stealing from people like Vorric to notice people like me." Around 7, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code, I answered. "Vorric," Arundel's voice was hollow, stripped of its usual authority. "We need to talk, in person." "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "Please," he said, and the word sounded like it physically hurt him. "Not about the company, about Orlisse." I hesitated. "What about her?" "She's not well," he said quietly. "She won't eat, won't sleep, just sits in her room staring at nothing. Thessia is worried, I'm worried. She needs help, and she won't accept it from us. But she might accept it from you." Every instinct told me to refuse, to protect myself from being pulled back into their dysfunction. But the memory of Orlisse's face in that conference room, the complete devastation in her eyes, made me pause. "I'll think about it," I said, and ended the call. That night, I sat in my hotel room surrounded by news coverage of the day's events. My face was everywhere. Some outlets were calling me a hero. Others were more measured, focusing on the systemic issues the case revealed. A few were already questioning whether my version of events was completely accurate, suggesting that workplace attribution was often complicated. But the evidence spoke for itself: documents, emails, timestamps, testimony from multiple sources. The truth was out, and no amount of spin could put it back in the bottle. Around midnight, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Orlisse standing in the hallway. She looked terrible, eyes red and swollen, hair pulled back in a messy knot, wearing sweatpants and an oversized jacket. I opened the door. "I shouldn't be here," she said immediately. "I know I shouldn't. But I couldn't spend another night without saying this to your face." I stepped aside, let her enter. She walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold together. "I watched the press conference," she said. "I heard everything you said, everything you revealed, and all I could think was how much I failed you." "Orlisse," I started, but she cut me off. "No, let me finish, please." She turned to face me. I told myself I was protecting us. That staying silent was the smart play, the safe play. That eventually, Dad would see your worth and everything would work out. But that was a lie. I was protecting myself, my comfort, my inheritance, my place in a family that I knew was toxic but couldn't imagine leaving. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and the worst part is, I knew what he was doing to you. I knew you deserved better. But every time I tried to speak up, every time I thought about standing with you, I'd remember what he said, that I'd lose everything, and I chose everything over you. She wiped her face with her sleeve. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that you were right. About all of it, and I'm so sorry." I stood there, watching her fall apart, and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a vast emptiness where love used to be. "I believe you're sorry," I said finally. "I believe you understand now what you couldn't see then. But Orlisse, understanding isn't enough. You had years to make a different choice, and every single time you chose silence." "I know," she whispered. "I needed you," I said, "not after it all fell apart, during, when they were tearing me down, when your father was stealing my work, when your brother was mocking me at family dinners. That's when I needed you to stand with me, and you weren't there." She nodded, unable to speak. "I hope you find peace with your choices," I said. "I really do, but I can't be part of your healing process. I can't be the person who absolves you or helps you feel better about what happened. I have to focus on moving forward." "I understand," she said, voice breaking. She walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For everything you've built, everything you've become. You did it despite us, and that's remarkable." She left, and I listened to her footsteps fade down the hallway. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself feel it, not the triumph of exposure, not the vindication of truth. Just the profound sadness of realizing that some things, once broken, can never be repaired. The board meeting happened 3 days later. It was supposed to be routine, a formality to officially recognize the operational transfer. But when I walked into the conference room at Castro Industries headquarters, I realized it was something else entirely. Every board member was present. So were representatives from the major industry trade associations, a few journalists from respected business publications, and sitting in the corner with his attorney Arundel Castro. He looked diminished somehow. The silver hair that had always caught the light perfectly now just looked gray. The suit that used to command attention hung slightly loose on his frame. When our eyes met, he looked away first. Kaylor sat at the head of the table, and he gestured for me to take the seat beside him. As I sat down, I noticed a document in front of each board member. The cover page read, "Independent Audit Results, Attribution and Performance Review." One of the board members, an older woman named Colleen, who I'd met once in passing, cleared her throat. "Mr. Tenvale, this board owes you an apology, a significant one." I said nothing, just waited. "We commissioned an independent audit after the press conference," she continued. "We needed to verify the claims made, to understand the full scope of what occurred. The results are damning." She held up the report. Over the past 3 years, 47 major initiatives were attributed to executive leadership that were actually designed and implemented by you. The financial impact of your work accounts for 83% of the company's profitability during that period. Another board member, a man named Tenvale, spoke up. We also discovered that recommendations for your advancement were blocked on 6 separate occasions. Performance reviews were altered. And perhaps most disturbing, there's evidence of active interference with external employment opportunities. Arundel shifted in his seat but said nothing. This board failed in its oversight duties, Cullen said. We failed to question the sudden turnaround in company performance. We failed to investigate when talented employees left citing concerns about recognition and advancement. And we failed you, Mr. Tenvale, in the most fundamental way possible. She stood, and the other board members followed. On behalf of Castro Industries, we formally apologize for the treatment you received and the injustice done to your career and reputation. The apology hung in the air. Part of me wanted to accept it graciously, to move past this moment. But another part, the part that had sat silent through years of dismissal, needed to speak. I appreciate the apology, I said, standing to face them. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't just about me. Your audit found 47 instances involving my work. How many others were there? How many other employees had their contributions stolen or minimized? How many talented people left this company because they saw no path forward? The room was silent. The problem wasn't just Arundel Castro, I continued. The problem was a culture that allowed it to happen, a board that didn't ask questions. Executives who benefited from stolen work without wondering where it came from. A system built on taking credit rather than giving it. Tenvale nodded slowly. You're right, and that's why we're implementing comprehensive changes. New attribution policies, transparent performance tracking, and regular independent audits. It won't fix what happened, but it might prevent it from happening again. There's one more thing, Cullen said. She pulled out another document. The board has voted unanimously to award you retroactive bonuses for each of the 47 initiatives. The total comes to $1.6 million. It's not adequate compensation for what was taken from you, but it's a start. I stared at the number. That money would change everything, erase years of financial stress, provide security I'd never had. But it also felt hollow somehow. Money couldn't give me back the 3 years of my life spent fighting for scraps of recognition. I'll accept it, I said finally, on one condition. Half goes into a fund for employees who've experienced similar treatment. People who've had their work stolen, their careers blocked, their contributions erased. They deserve restitution too. Cullen smiled slightly. Done. The meeting concluded with formal votes and procedural matters. When it ended, people filed out slowly, some stopping to shake my hand or offer quiet words of congratulations. Kaylor clapped me on the shoulder. You handled that with more grace than I would have, he said. Eventually, only Arundel and I remained. His attorney had left, and he sat alone at the far end of the table, staring at his folded hands. I suppose you're satisfied now, he said, voice barely above a whisper. No, I replied. I'm not satisfied. I'm just done. He looked up at me. I built this company from nothing, 40 years of my life, and in 3 days, you've taken it all apart. You took it apart, I said. You chose ego over integrity. You chose control over collaboration. Every decision that led here was yours. I thought I was protecting the company, he said. Protecting the family legacy. You were protecting yourself, I corrected, and you destroyed your family in the process. He flinched. Orlisse won't speak to me. Hasn't said a word since that press conference. Thessia barely looks at me. Even Sylvan is keeping his distance. That's the consequence of your choices, I said. Not mine. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Did I ever have a chance to make this right with you? I considered the question. Yes. Every time you dismissed me in a meeting. Every time you took credit for my work. Every time you saw me trying and chose to hold me down instead of lifting me up. You had 1,000 chances. And I wasted all of them, he said. Yes, I agreed, you did. I walked out of that conference room and down the hallway I'd walked so many times before. But this time, people nodded to me with respect. Colleagues stopped to congratulate me. Someone even started clapping as I passed, and others joined in until the entire floor was applauding. I didn't stop. I just kept walking until I reached the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw my reflection in the polished metal. Same face, same person. But somehow, I stood taller. Outside, the autumn sun was bright and cold. I pulled out my phone and saw dozens of messages, job offers from competitors, interview requests from major media outlets, even a message from the industry association asking me to speak at their annual conference. But the one that caught my attention was from Marcus. "Drinks tonight? The whole operations team wants to celebrate with you." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." Because ultimately, that's what mattered. Not Arundel's downfall or the board's apology or even the vindication of truth. It was the people who'd stood beside me, who'd seen my worth when others refused to, who deserved celebration. The war was over. Not because I'd destroyed my enemy, but because I'd finally stopped fighting for the approval of people who were never going to give it. And in that surrender, I'd found something better than victory. I'd found peace. 9 months later, I found myself standing outside the warehouse where it all began. The building looked smaller than I remembered, paint peeling in places, the security lights flickering in the dusk. But it was still standing, still serving its purpose. I'd driven here on impulse, no real plan, just a need to close the circle somehow, to see where the path had started before I walked too far down the new one. The loading dock where I'd sat with Kaylor that night was empty now. I climbed up and sat in the same spot, legs dangling over the edge, watching the sun set behind the industrial skyline. The air smelled like diesel and rain, familiar and grounding. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "Team meeting went great. Everyone's on board with the new initiatives. You built something special here." I smiled. Castro Industries, now operating as a Venreth subsidiary, was thriving. The culture had shifted completely. Attribution was transparent. Advancement was merit-based. And the employees who'd once been invisible were finally being seen. Another message came through, this one from Kaylor. "Board approved your proposal. The Employee Restitution Fund is live. Well done." I pocketed the phone and pulled out something I'd been carrying for weeks. A small wooden plaque, the kind you'd hang in an office. I'd had it made custom, with a single engraved line, "Help first, everything else follows." It wasn't profound or elegant, but it was true. It was the principle that had guided me that night with Kaylor, and every decision since. Not strategy, or ambition or revenge. Just the simple choice to help when help was needed. I set the plaque on the loading dock beside me, running my fingers over the engraved letters. Tomorrow I'd hang it in my new office. But tonight, it belonged here, where the lesson was learned. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned to see a security guard approaching, young guy, maybe 25, flashlight in hand. "Evening," he said cautiously. "You're not supposed to be here after hours." I stood, brushed off my pants. "Sorry, used to work here, just wanted to see the place one more time." He studied me for a moment, then his eyes widened slightly. "Wait, you're that guy, from the news, the Castro Industries thing." "That's me," I said. He lowered his flashlight. "Man, that was something. You really showed them." He paused, then added, "I'm taking online courses. Business management. Trying to move up, you know? Your story kind of inspired me to keep pushing." I picked up the plaque and handed it to him. "Here, you'll need this more than me." He read it, confused. "I don't understand." "You will," I said. "Just remember, whatever you build, build it by lifting others up, not by standing on them." He nodded slowly, gripping the plaque like it was valuable. I walked back to my car, and as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The young guard was still standing there, reading the plaque under the security lights. Maybe he'd understand it right away. Maybe it would take him years. Either way, the message would be there when he needed it. My phone rang. "Kaylor." "Dinner?" he asked when I answered. "My treat. We're celebrating the quarterly numbers." "I'll be there," I said. Because that was the real victory, not the vindication or the money or the public acknowledgement. It was the simple fact that I'd found people who valued the same things I did, who understood that success meant nothing if it was built on someone else's broken dreams. I pulled into traffic, heading toward the restaurant. The city lights were coming on, each one a small beacon in the growing dark. And for the first time in years, I wasn't fighting against anything. I was just moving forward, one choice at a time, building something worth keeping. They tried to erase my story. But stories don't disappear when you ignore them. They just wait, patient and persistent, until someone brave enough finally tells them. And once told, once spoken into the light, they become something no one can take away. Not a monument to what was stolen, but a foundation for what comes next. I smiled and kept driving. The past finally where it belonged, behind me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.